Today is Wednesday, 15th of July, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. Now, if you remember yesterday, we talked about predictability, which is the right-hand side of the model, your growth and capital. And today we talk about the foundation of that predictability, of where predictability sits on. That is controlled resilience and systems. Remember when last week we mentioned about resilience. I think it's very valuable because a business becomes resilient when it knows what matters most, what can break first, who owns the fix, and how fast the company can respond. And this is based on three pillars, which is productivity planning, operational agility, and financial health. So we're not going to go deep in resilience today because this is not about resilience this particular week. We are talking about growing. So what that means in plain English, if you may, this is where the board stop asking, are we growing, and start asking, can this business take the strain? So it's not a matter of growing, it's a matter of resilience. How strong we are to continue growing at the pace that we are doing so. Because a company does not usually fall apart all at once, if you may see. It leaks first. It have several issues that start to compound and at the end produce the crash or the crisis or whatever you want to call it. So it could be many little things like a misapproval here, a weak handover there, a cyber gap that nobody owned, a report that gets cleaned manually every month and carry forward a mistake, a little formula, a little digit somewhere that actually is so embedded into the report that actually at the end you are making decisions in something that is a complete fiction. It's not the reality anymore because actually this error carried forward can make a big damage at one point. A control that exists on paper, but not in practice. So you might have the binders, the policies, everything, but actually nobody is applying or controlling that actually is happening. So that one day, everybody calls it a surprise. So, what happened here? So it's not a surprise, as I mentioned, it's a drift. So let's focus on the section that we're going to focus today, which is performance, governance, risk, compliance, and assets. Particularly in terms of the system today, I'm going to focus in governance, risk, and compliance, not in performance and assets as I did last week. So if you're interested in that section, go to the live streamings from last week. Now, in terms of governance, risk, and compliance, let's take a look at three problems with this. Problem number one is that the governance bar has moved. So leaders are expected to understand the controls that matter, not just the financial controls, but the controls that protect operations and reporting. So compliance, data, trust, and business continuity are conversation on the table now. If the board cannot explain what is material, it cannot explain what is safe. And go to the material portion later on because I think that this is very important. Problem number two is that the scope is wider than many teams assume. Controls are not only the finance department, by the way. They include who can approve, who can change records, and this is very important. Who can change records, right? For example, who can change records, the signatures in the bank accounts is very important. Who can access systems? Who owns supplier, who tests recovery, who checks evidence, and who sees early warning signs. And problem number three is that the outside threats are not slowing down, unfortunately. And particularly now with the AI, the issues, the gaps are magnifying. So your operation procedures, your workflows, your normalized, this is a way that we do things around here. If this is normalized errors, as I mentioned in spreadsheets, also in operational activities, that small errors or normalizations or works around is start to be magnified now with the speed of the technology. Also, you see how easy it is to be a victim of a cyber or a fraud, not because of your own account or your own negligence, if you may. It's because A large organization have been hacked, and then by the way, by default, all your data is there: your bank account, your email addresses, passwords, phone numbers, you name it. So how you protect your own organization from failures from other organizations outside your own one? Maybe supply disruptions, system failures, contract mistakes, and data problems are part of a normal business life now. So if the company treats these as a rare event, probably is reading the wrong world that we are operating now. So in other words, imagine like you don't test a fire alarm by waiting for a building to burn. You test it before even the slightest hint of smoke is in the building. So you have a recurring pattern or sequence of testing just to make sure that actually in the event that happens, you are ready with the mechanisms and the protocols to evacuate the building and save as much as you can save if that event happens, right? So this is what we're talking about. Put your fire alarms in place and test them. So this is what we're going to do. As a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is that exactly that, test your systems. So the first thing to think is define what material means in plain English. So I mentioned material earlier, so I want to give you a very short crash course of what is material. Material is pretty much anything substantial or relevant or significant enough to influence economic decisions, operation strategies, or legal outcomes in your organizations. And remember what the resilient pillars, the proactive planning, operational agility, and financial health. So all these things, material, constitute the materiality of your organization. And things that sounds an abstract term, but what is material? There's things to consider. What is material for your company might not be material for other companies. So you have to identify what is materiality or what is material in your organization, right? So questions that general question that you can identify what is material for your company would be, for example, which failures will hurt your valuation? Yeah, what it fails in your business. So if you can name the things that fails, those things are material, right? Because actually are relevant to your business and can hurt your valuation or the valuation of your business. Other question would be which failures will damage trust in terms of your branding, in terms of your suppliers, your customers, your distribution, etc., etc. So those are things that constitute materiality in your organization. Other things will be which failures will stop operations, right? So then you start to identify what is material, what is no material, but more importantly, what is relevant to your organization in terms of materiality. And another two questions would be which failures would create compliance risk in terms of compliance with the regulators or legally or financially, etc., etc. Or which failures will break reporting. That's another thing, because I remember the spreadsheet case. If we look into a spreadsheet and there is a slightly error in formulations, digits, etc., that carry over to the next week, month, quarter, you name it, and that is a material failure that can make you do very bad decisions, not because they are bad decisions itself, because the information, the data was corrupted in a way or how. So start here, not with the giant spreadsheet. The second thing is a map ownership, not only processes. A control with no clear owner is not really control. It's just a good wish. They say, oh, it will be interesting too, or we need to control this, and nobody is named or accountable for that. So it's a wish, really. So the board should know who runs the controls, how is evidenced, and how often is tested. So remember the fire alarm. So it's not just about having the fire alarm. It's also who is going to evidence or log the test and who is responsible for that. That happens when it fails, and who has authority to fix it. And the third thing is make a resilience practical, right? So we have the advisory board operating system here, and the lens today is, as I mentioned, is we're going to focus is in governance, risk, and compliance. So this is what keeps the business honest. The system keeps the business repeatable, meaning actually your workflows, your operation procedures, your triage, who is responsible for what, when, and why, and which is escalation path, etc., etc. When those two works together, the board gets fewer surprises and better decisions. This is where An advisory board helps because controls are not one skill. You may need someone who understands audit, other people that understand cybersecurity, other people that understand operation controls, other people that understand risk reporting, other who understand sectors or the industry and geographies, etc. Also, someone who can challenge the board without slowing the business down. This is a very important function, because if you are saying yes to everything, and then what is the purpose of having an advisory board or a leadership team that is saying yes to the founder all the time, even if they disagree? So those challenges have to be structured in a way that actually, instead of becoming a problem, become a project. So it's a different thing to address a situation as a problem as address it as a project. So if you address something as a project, then you say, okay, we need something with an outcome. But if you have a problem, you're looking for solutions. And guess what? Solutions, everybody has their own ideas. But when you have a project, you have a very specific outcome that you have to achieve. That is hard to get from one hire, right? So one person. They are people that are very skilled, very experienced, but also they are in high demand, and probably are extremely well paid to do that. So then you say, how long is going to take, how much is going to cost to hire one person to do all these things? It's also expensive to solve through a broad consulting firm if the issue is very targeted, like a governance, risk, and compliance, because the advisory firms or the consulting firms, they bring with a plethora or a book of play or a manual or an encyclopedia of playbooks, and they want to apply all of them onto your organization. And the reason why is very simple: invoicing. They invoice per hour per project, and they want to keep you loop in those invoicing cycles because it's revenue for them. But here's the thing: a rotating advisory board gives the business controls and resilience capabilities around your current milestone. And it's going to challenge you. Remember the challenge questions? It will ask questions like, control exists, well done, but the evidence is weak. Where is the evidence of those controls? They might say the ownership is named, but who tests that, right? You might say things like a business is moving faster than the controls model, right? So remember spreadsheets. So do we have a better way to control this than spreadsheets? So the challenge is valuable because it turns discomfort that you're having today into evidence. And when you have evidence, you have a better way to document. Once it's documented as evidence, it's a better way to make decisions. Now, what do you gain working with me? Three things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, controls are over what is material, anything substantial, relevant, or significant enough to influence economic decisions, operation strategies, and legal outcomes. Cleaner control maps, sharper accountability, better reporting, and fewer blind spots between risk, operations, and governance. In terms of differentiator, it is that controls are not treated as a pure compliance exercise, right? The advisory board brings the right mix of risk, cybersecurity, audit, operation, and sector expertise faster than hiring one executive with lower overhead than the big consulting firm, and not talent locked in, because we can swap members as the projects evolve through this advisory board operating model. And the risk reduction is weak controls and slow management. That is a very, very high risk. So the business gets sharper challenge without bloating the payroll or turning every control issue into a 6-month project. Now, one action you can take today, and we are going to use our visual aid on the screen now, and this is doable in 30 minutes or less. So pick up 4 top 5 material risk. For each one, ask 3 questions. Which controls will stop this? Who owns it? And what evidence proof it worked last month? So if you cannot answer those 3 questions, the control needs work. And this is pretty much your first template to understand where your control map is sitting in your organization. So let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow we move from protection to, which is a baseline of our operating model, to edge. the innovation, the transformation, what makes your company relevant for the next generation or the next iteration of your company, next 3-5 years. Because once the systems are steadier, the board has to decide how to reinvent the business without tearing up what already works, right? So you don't want to erase with your elbow what you're writing with your hand. So if you are a founder, a chair, an audit committee, a non-executive director or executive or somebody that needs to make these kind of decisions, and you need a stronger control without slowing the business, let's have a 30-minute chat so I can understand where you're coming from, where you are going to go, or where you would like to go. And we can build a tailored advisory board for this first project, and then we can evolve as the projects evolve. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you, and bye-bye.